This is Calm AF, a podcast for humans who are hard on themselves. A podcast for the overthinkers, people pleasers, perfectionists, and overachievers. I'm Kristen Finch, and I'm going to teach you how to quiet that incessant negative chatter in your head. Because you know what a person with a calm mind can do? Anything they want. Grab your coffee, gorgeous soul, because today's the day you get Calm AF. Hello, gorgeous soul. Welcome to Calm AF. I hope you're having an amazing day. Today we're going to be talking about approval addiction. So here's how you know. If you feel like you're filtering yourself a lot in your life, like filtering what you say, how you act, how you look, and it's all through the lens of what you think other people expect from you, or if you notice that you tend to make decisions based on what other people will think about it. So you rely a lot on what you think other people's opinions are, and it's all in the hopes of getting their validation, their approval, or their praise. You might be an approval addict. If you find yourself wondering a lot if people are mad at you, if people are upset with you, if people are disappointed in you, if you find yourself seeking reassurance that they're not mad at you or disappointed in you, if you are coming up with all the things in your head that clearly you must have done wrong because you imagine that people are having these negative opinions of you, you might be an approval addict, and this episode is especially for you. There is very little in the world. That's not true. There are very few things in the world that break my heart more than my overthinking, overachieving approval seekers. I see so clearly that your old stories have such a grip on you. You believe that you need to be constantly proving your worthiness by what you do or how productive you are or how helpful you are or how amazing you are. And I can see the truth. It's one of my superpowers. I feel like I'm like the quickest soul reader in the West. Like I have this X-ray vision. I can see through the bullshit stories. I can see right down to the truth, right down to the soul, that who you are is who you're supposed to be. And all of these stories that you're just carrying around with you are bullshit. There's nothing for you to prove. You are worthy. No approval necessary. And honestly, truly, if I could somehow figure out how to wave a magic wand so that you could see how amazing you are without having to do any of the hard work, I totally would. I would take that cheat. But alas, here we are, no magic wand in sight. So let's talk about approval addiction. And I'm actually purposefully using the word addiction here because I believe that for most people, this need for approval, it doesn't feel like something you can control. Like in the same way drugs control a drug addict, the need for external validation controls the approval addict, which means just like all addictions, it's not something that you can easily just stop doing, right? It's in order to recover from any addiction, you have to address the root of the problem. You have to get to the core of the issue. White knuckling will only get you so far. I define approval addiction as when your self-worth is solely dependent on other people's opinions on you. So approval seekers rely on external validation to feel worthy, to feel good about themselves. And this can show up in lots of different ways. The most common being overthinking, people-pleasing, energy managing, perfectionist thinking. Sound familiar? Does it sound like the description of this podcast? Yes. And there's other telltale signs. You might constantly be seeking praise or external validation. You might be someone who avoids conflict at all costs, or you might be what I would call a chameleon, which means you know how to change your colors to fit in any situation with whoever you are with. And if you're like, okay, well, shit, that sounds like me, my friend, you are not alone. In order to know why we all struggle with this, and I say all, I think most of us do struggle with this to some extent, we have to go back to how this behavior comes to be. And the roots of approval addiction most of the time go back to childhood, right? As your brain is developing, as it's moving from that reptilian brain where you were just in survival to the limbic brain where you're starting to connect emotions and memories. As you're doing this, you are learning that the people around you have opinions about your behavior. And you start realizing that in order to feel safe and loved and not be rejected or abandoned, that you need to be seeking approval from your parents or your caregivers or other authority figures. It feels like a necessary thing that you need to do to start gaining approval from the people around you. And if you grew up in an environment where there were very clear black and white rules of what it means to be a good person, how you should behave, and anytime you deviated from these rules, you were somehow judged or rejected, whether it was subtle or not, you probably developed a really strong need, which led to an addiction to external validation. Like, I need this. I need my mom to not be mad at me. I need my dad to not be disappointed in me in order to feel safe. And again, this doesn't have to be like aggressive or outright messages like, you are wrong, you are a terrible person. The more empathic you are, the more those really subtle messages, a look on the face, a shift in your position, it signals that what you are doing is not meeting this person's rules. This alone can be enough to create an approval addiction. So it starts in childhood, either through this direct or perceived messaging, and then you go out into the world. You start leaving your house, you go to school, you go to sports, and you start learning that there are different rules and expectations everywhere. From school to teams to friends to social media, the excessive amount of opinions and expectations of other people can be overwhelming and super confusing since they're all different. And they are all impacting your self-esteem and worthiness. So, seeking external validation, seeking approval becomes a very common coping mechanism. Like, if I can just get everyone's approval, if I can just make sure everyone is okay and nobody can think one single negative thing about me, then I can relax and feel calm and enjoy my life. But, I mean, that's impossible. There's just no end because there's always another person right around the corner that has a different set of expectations and rules. Approval addiction is costing you your inner peace. This is one of the most detrimental consequences of approval seeking because what it does is it eats away at your sense of worthiness and it prevents you from ever feeling safe enough to really and genuinely be yourself. Every time you believe that your worthiness hinges on someone else's opinion or approval of you, you are moving farther and farther away from your authentic self. And what happens when you do that over time? You have a hard time really knowing what you like at all, who you really are, what your own opinions are. I often hear people saying like, I don't know what I like. I don't know what I want to do. This is because there has been such a long period of time when you've not trusted yourself. You've relied on everyone else's opinions. When your self-worth is solely dependent on others' approval, you don't feel safe to just be yourself. You are constantly people-pleasing or energy managing or overachieving, always trying to fit in, always trying to control. This is what it comes to, you trying to control other people's thoughts and opinions so that you can feel okay. And not only is that fucking exhausting, but it is robbing you from living the life you were put here to live. Approval addiction is also costing you authentic and healthy relationships. Think about this. When you are running around hypervigilantly thinking about who you need to be for everyone else, and then you become that version temporarily depending on who you're with, who knows knows the real you? It's really difficult to build authentic, honest relationships when you don't let anyone know the real you. And maybe that's because you don't know the real you. People know the version of you that you have shown them, that you have morphed into in an attempt to control their thoughts about you, but they don't know the real you. They don't know what you're really like. I also feel like it's safe for me to say here, because I know a lot of approval addicts, myself included. I consider myself an addict in recovery. It's also safe to say, because of this approval addiction, that you've probably created relationships that are very one-sided. You've created safety for them to be themselves, but you will not let your guard down. You won't let them see who you really are so that you can be seen and supported. This approval seeking leads to these very superficial and unbalanced relationships. And I see them in friendships. I see them in parent-child relationships. I see them in marriages. This is what happens. If you find yourself feeling underappreciated, undervalued, resentful, this is why you've created this relationship. And listen, this is not an excuse for you to be like beating yourself up about it. We just need to know, right? This is why you might feel like you are constantly the one in relationships that are, trying, and no one else is. This is why. Or you might be the one in a relationship that's constantly asking for reassurance, constantly seeking out validation, or asking people to tell you what they think you should do. And obviously that can get tiring for the other person in the relationship. Either way, no matter what side you land on, and probably a little bit of both, approval seeking so negatively impacts relationships, no matter how it looks. Approval addiction is also costing you the life you want to be living. You cannot genuinely enjoy your life or spend time with people you genuinely enjoy in your life if you are not able to show up as yourself. If you aren't able to make decisions without making sure you have thought about every possible angle, making sure whatever decision you make will never have any negative consequences for anyone else, you are going to be spending a lot of time feeling anxious, sitting around and overthinking, spinning your wheels. And a lot less time, if you're doing that all the time, you are not spending much time manifesting or creating the life that you want. You aren't. You aren't spending your time the way you really want to. You are spending your life the way you think other people think you should. And if you think you need to think about every person's opinion, get everyone to put their stamp of approval on however you choose to spend your time or your money or your life, that's going to keep you from feeling fulfilled, from doing the things that are meant for you and that you are here to do. Everything you don't do, everything you don't say because you think someone else is going to disagree or disapprove or dislike, every time you do that, you're reinforcing the bullshit belief that everyone needs to think you're okay, that you're doing everything right in order for you to feel okay. It's exhausting. So if there's no magic wand, if I cannot give you the little magic wand, what do you do? So the first thing I want to offer is that I don't think approval-seeking behaviors are something we ever completely rid ourselves of. If you think of it like a chronic health condition that you can't cure, but you can get really good at understanding it, managing the symptoms, and preventing flares, that's how I think about approval addiction. And the reason I am offering this is because the trigger of approval seeking is other people and their opinion, which means in order to completely eradicate approval addiction, you would probably need to live a life where you have no contact with other humans and their opinions. I don't know if you guys heard that story a few weeks ago. There was a lady who lived in a cave for 500 days. Like maybe she could not have approval addiction. By the way, if you haven't read it, spoiler alert, this story is fascinating, and she loved living in the cave, and she did not want to return to the above ground world. So, I mean, that's saying something about the above ground world. So, I just wanted to offer that. Like, don't look at it as like, I never, ever feel the need to get approval anymore. That is not a thing because you're still living in the world with humans. So what can you do to be an approval addict in recovery, to manage the symptoms and prevent the flares? First, you got to unlearn the worthy story. The roots of the approval addiction lie in this lack of self-worth. So ultimately, the way to free yourself from the approval trap is to unlearn the worthy stories you have, that there's something wrong with who you are, and that you need validation in order to feel like you're okay. You got to unlearn the stories that you can't trust yourself, that you need everyone else's stamp of approval. Another disclaimer, I just have to add, stop trying to do this shit on your own. Unlearning this story about your unworthiness isn't about being strong enough or consistent enough. It's simply because we tend to really believe our own stories. That's how your brain is designed, to believe whatever it's been told to believe. And so what happens is we don't see our own issues. We don't see our own stories. I call them worthy blind spots, especially when the risks seem so very dangerous, right? If you think about it, the potential consequence of letting go of approval seeking is that people won't approve of you, which means you could lose people. You could be rejected. You could be criticized. People could leave you. This is a primal fear. It's like it triggers our lizard brain, being rejected or abandoned. And anytime we are dealing with those primal fears, your brain is going to convince you to keep that story. Keep getting the approval. Keep getting the external validation. That's why you don't do this on your own. You need to get a therapist or a coach, someone to help you. So that's the first step. Unlearn the unworthy story. Now you got to give yourself the compassion that you so readily give others. As you unlearn your approval-seeking behaviors, you have to be treating yourself with kindness and compassion, just like you treat everyone else in your life. I know you. I know you do this. You have all the patience in the world, all of the grace in the world for someone else. So how about if you take some of that love and empathy that you seem to have an abundant amount of for everyone else, that you freely give to others when they feel down, and maybe just turn it on yourself. Give a little bit of this compassion and grace to yourself, so that whenever you catch yourself seeking approval or feeling like you need someone else's permission, you can just pause and ask yourself, what would I say to someone I love in this situation? How would I comfort my child if they didn't feel worthy enough, if they thought they needed everyone to like them in order to be worthy of like? What advice would I give to my best friend if they were afraid to pursue their dreams because of their partner's opinion? Put yourself in the shoes of a compassionate witness and direct that same level of empathy and understanding towards yourself. Number 3, you've got to rewrite that worthy story. As you're unlearning the old stories, you also need to be rewriting the story that you want to believe. Remember, the brain is wired to believe whatever you tell it to believe. So you've got to rewrite a story of how you're worthy of love and kindness and respect. No approval or validation necessary. You want to mindfully choose this new story that you want to believe in. Think about the version of yourself without these unworthy beliefs. If I could suck them out of your brain with a vacuum, I would. If I did do that, who would you be? Who would you be without this belief that who you are is not enough unless you get everyone's approval? How would you talk to yourself if that's who you were? How would you make decisions if you did not know that you needed external validation? How would you handle other people being disappointed or disagreeing with you when you know that their disapproval means nothing more than they have an opinion? How would that version of you feel? Just going about your day, not overthinking what everyone else is thinking, not needing to overachieve or overproduce or overwork in order to get validation or approval. What would that feel like? And this is the feeling. This is the one you're going to start adding more of into your days on purpose. You don't need to get to the place where you already have, unlearned your unworthy story or unlearned your addiction approval addiction story, you don't need to wait until the end to start feeling it. However you would feel without the story, you can start adding that into your day now. What thoughts will you have? And how will you show up in the world as your future self? This is your future self. So you want to connect with this future self regularly to get to know the worthy version better, not just when you are faced with challenging situations. And the fourth step is practice, practice, practice. You don't just rewrite the story and then be like, done, and never look at it again. This takes time. It takes practice. It takes repetition so that this new story's neural pathway becomes stronger than the old story's neural pathway. Again, this is something we usually need reminders and accountability for. We don't do this on our own. Like in Calm AF Life, I send everyone a written reminder of their worthiness in the form of a love letter every single day. Every day, I send them an email to remind them to align with their future self, because that's how new neural pathways become hardwired neural pathways. Decide how you're going to practice this new story every day. Decide how you'll hold yourself accountable to becoming this next version of yourself, this version that doesn't need anyone's approval. Decide what that looks like and make it happen. Don't just listen to me right now and think, yeah, totally, I'm going to do that. And then do nothing until you listen to me again next week. Do something. Find a support system where not only will you get that daily reminder, you also have access to a person who can see through your bullshit so they can help you see your blind spots. This is what Calm AF Life is designed for, to guide you and support you through the whole process, from the unlearning to the rewiring to the practicing to the embodying your new story, so you can stop this approval addiction. You can stop the overthinking, the people-pleasing, the energy managing. So join me today and feel better today. The link is in the show notes if you are ready to join. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. I love you so very much. We'll see you next time. If you love this podcast, you will love Calm AF Life. It's a self-paced, lifetime access DIY course that teaches you all the concepts that I talk about here, from nervous system regulation to manifesting with ease. And since we know that true change doesn't happen just because you know what to do, you also get an all-access pass to coaching calls and accountability so you don't stay stuck and you don't give up. The best investment you could ever make is in yourself. Calm AF Life is here for you now. Life's not waiting. Let's get you aligned with your Calm AF self, gorgeous soul. I cannot wait to meet you. Go to KristenFinch.com and join me today.